Sorry for the delay, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 16th meeting of the Half Moon Bay City Council. I ask for a roll call, please.
Councilmember Johnson? Here. Councilmember Nagengast?
Here.
Councilmember Penrose?
Here.
Vice Mayor Ruddick?
Here.
Mayor Brownstone?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Make a motion to approve, Pledge of Allegiance. Can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion approved. Thank you. So next on the agenda, we're moving on to proclamations and presentations. First, we're going to have a presentation from Midcoast Council.
Good evening, and as always, thanks for having me over. I'm Scott from the Midcoast Community Council. And first off, a little order of business I want to take care of. I just wanted to, from the MCC to the community, apologize for having to postpone some agenda items from our meetings and cancel a meeting due to illness and some caregiver issues that were going on. But at our next meeting, we'll be at full strength, and we have two exciting agenda items to cover at that one. So the first one is during that our next meeting on Wednesday is the planning meeting to discuss the parking issues associated with the Surfers Beach area and the new proposed parking area, the removal of parking along one. And we hope to be able to invite all, not at this meeting, but plan to invite all the stakeholders, which include you guys in HMB, Caltrans, the Harbor, the Coastal Commission, GCSD, and the county. So that's going to be our planning meeting to try to get everybody together and do the best thing for the community. The second item I want to talk about is I attended a 2-day seminar down there at the fire station regarding the Defensible Space Initiative given by CAL FIRE. And I'll be giving a presentation on that at our next meeting. It's really all about keeping the embers produced from a firestorm from burning our houses to entering our houses or interacting with combustible material around the house. So we're going to talk about Zone Zero and the things that I learned at that CAL FIRE meeting. And that's about it for my update. Thank you. You got any questions?
Any questions? No questions. Thanks very much. Good to see you. Okay, next, Julissa will have a presentation, a proclamation for Hispanic Heritage Month.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and community. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. It is a time to celebrate and honor the cultures, histories, and contributions of the Hispanic and Latino Americans, whose ancestry can be traced back to Mexico, Spain, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. This celebration starts on September 15 to mark the Independence Day of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica, followed by Mexico on the 16th, Chile on the 18th, and Belize on the 21st. I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation, and afterwards I'll present our recipients. Victor, I will be reading the proclamation in Spanish as well. So the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas from the early settlers of the New World to today's vibrant communities, Hispanics have profoundly shaped and enriched the fabric of American life. And whereas the United States Congress officially designated the period from September 15 to October 15 as Hispanic Heritage Month in 1988, recognizing the lasting impact and invaluable contributions of Hispanic communities. And whereas Hispanic Heritage Month celebrates the achievements of Americans with roots in Spain, Mexico, Central and South America, and the Spanish-speaking nations of the Caribbean. And whereas reaffirming that diversity is one of our country's greatest strengths, and we honor the leaders who have championed equal justice, driven progress, and created pathways for future generations. And whereas September 15 was chosen to commemorate Independence Day anniversaries of 5 Latin American countries, and September 16 for Mexico's independence. And whereas this year's theme is collective heritage, honoring the past, inspiring the future, reminds us of the enduring legacy and promise of Hispanic communities across the nation. And whereas the influence of Hispanic culture is deeply woven into the state's customs, legal traditions, arts, and public life, and whereas Hispanic Americans have overcome great barriers to excel across sectors, playing a vital role in the growth and strength of the American government, business, agriculture, armed forces, commerce, education, the arts, science, sports, and whereas Hispanic Americans are one of the fastest growing communities in this country and represent 66.35 million, or 19.5% of the US residents, 40% of California's population, which signifies the nation's largest Hispanic population, and approximately 29% of the city of Half Moon Bay. Now, therefore, be it known that the City Council of Half Moon Bay declares September 15, 2025 to October 15, 2025 as Hispanic Heritage Month in the city of Half Moon Bay. I will read it now in Spanish. Apologies, it's long. Proclamación. Considerando que desde los primeros colonos del Nuevo Mundo hasta las vibrantes comunidades de hoy, los hispanos han moldeado y enriquecido profundamente el tejido de la vida estadounidense, y considerando que el Congreso de los Estados Unidos designó oficialmente el periodo del 15 de septiembre al 15 de octubre como el mes de la herencia hispana en 1988, reconociendo el impacto duradero y las contribuciones invaluables de las comunidades hispanas, y considerando que el mes de la herencia hispana celebra los logros de los estadounidenses con raíces en España, México, América Central y del Sur y las naciones de habla hispana del Caribe, y considerando que reafirmando que la diversidad es una de las mayores fortalezas de nuestro país, honramos a los líderes que han defendido la justicia igualitaria, han impulsado el progreso y han creado caminos para las generaciones futuras, y considerando que el 15 de septiembre fue elegido para conmemorar el aniversario de la independencia de 5 países latinoamericanos y el 16 de septiembre para la independencia de México, y considerando que el tema de este año es herencia colectiva, honrando el pasado, inspirando el futuro, nos recuerda el legado perdurable de la promesa de las comunidades hispanas en todo el país, y considerando que la influencia de la cultura hispana está profundamente entretejida en las costumbres, tradiciones legales, artes, vida pública de nuestro estado, y considerando que los hispanoamericanos han superado grandes barreras para sobresalir en todos los sectores, desempeñando un papel vital en el crecimiento y la fortaleza del gobierno, los negocios, la agricultura, las fuerzas armadas, el comercio, la educación, las artes, la ciencia y los deportes estadounidenses, y considerando que los hispanoamericanos son una de las comunidades de más rápido crecimiento en este país y representan el 66.35 millones o 19.5% de los residentes de los Estados Unidos, el 40% de la población de California, lo que significa la población hispana más grande del país, y aproximadamente el 29% de la población de la ciudad de Half Moon Bay. Ahora, por lo tanto, que se sepa que el Ayuntamiento de Half Moon Bay declara del 15 de septiembre de 2025 al 15 de octubre de 2025 como mes de la herencia hispana en la ciudad de Half Moon Bay. For 2025, we would like to present this proclamation to José Luis Aguirre from Carón, Rita Mancera from Puente, and Judith Guerrero from Cosi Hope. These 3 individuals work together to provide visibility to the often overlooked farm worker community. Over the past year, they interviewed and photographed 40 farm workers, showcasing and honoring their stories, struggles, and invaluable contributions. The photo exhibit, Harvesting Dreams, was the result of this vision and collaboration that many of us got to see on August 26 at the IDS Hall. It is my honor to present this proclamation to José Luis, Rita, and Judith, and recognize their leadership not only curating this exhibit, but championing equity and cultural recognition. Now I have Rita and Caitlin from Cosi Hope.
You're both here.
everybody. I didn't know we needed or we were going to say something, but I'm really excited to see that Half Moon Bay is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm really honored that many people here in Half Moon Bay and from the South Coast came and saw the photo exhibit that we did in partnership with these other two great organizations. Thank you so much.
To the chair, I'd like to
And my next item.
Oh, great. And our next item, Jaleesa will present our farm worker housing study.
I'll actually like to introduce Amanda Chang from Urban Habitat. She's the force behind the farm worker study that we'll be hearing from tonight.
Good evening, council members. Is the sound okay? Great. So really appreciate being invited here today on such a momentous occasion and to present some of our findings on the farm worker housing report that my organization did on behalf of the San Mateo Anti-Displacement Coalition, which is a group of about 15 organizations from Daly City to East Palo Alto who have come together to prevent displacement in our community. I'm also from San Mateo County, and so we really want to work together to keep our communities whole and prevent displacement. And we had a strategic retreat in 2024 to decide what our priorities would be for the coming year. And one of the things that we had addressed previously was tenant protections and worked to put forward a tenant protection ordinance at the county level of San Mateo. That ordinance failed to go through, and so we took a look back and decided, okay, if the county is not interested in this, what could they be interested in? What is the community interested in? How can we marry those things together? And so we got recommendations from Coastside Hope and Puente de la Costa Sur to examine what farm workers' needs were specifically to improve those and improve the lives of farm workers on the coast. So with that in mind, we interviewed 22 farm workers on the coast side who shared their experiences in the hopes of building a future where everyone can live in a dignified home. And I'm going to speed through the rest of this presentation pretty quickly because you all have it in front of you and happy to answer questions, but I really want to make sure that my colleagues, so I have 2 farm workers here today with me who I would like to share their experiences. So please bear with me as I speed through some of the information here. But we had just a few key takeaways from farm workers who shared their experiences. The first is that rents were too high for farm workers' incomes, even in subsidized housing such as Moonridge. Here's a quote demonstrating one of our interviewees' experiences. The second thing that farm workers shared was there was a lack of affordable housing, leaves them vulnerable to exploitative and hazardous living situations. So because there's not enough options, they find themselves living in overcrowded or pest-infested or mold-ridden housing situations and feel like they can't afford to move out because of the lack of affordable housing. And here is a quote to that effect as well from Half Moon Bay. The third thing that we heard from farm workers is that they live in constant fear of unemployment, particularly in employee housing where their housing is tied to their employment. And they fear accidents at work, having to go on maternity leave, feeling that they're unable to retire. So there's a feeling that if they cannot work anymore, then they will also no longer be able to be housed. And lastly, we heard that families have a particularly difficult time finding affordable housing due to housing discrimination from landlords or from employers. This quote is very long, so you can please read it in your own time, but another quote to that effect from Moss Beach. And then once we were done interviewing the farm workers, we started researching, what are ways to support farm workers as they work towards better housing, more dignified housing. The first is that there's a lot of great farm worker organizers and organizations that are doing work to help and improve the community, including in Pescadero fighting for clean water for the local high school through extending an existing water line. So our first recommendation is to support farm worker organizing through funding and legislation to make sure that they're able to continue advocating for their needs. The second is for policies and tenant protections that public bodies such as city councils or board of supervisors implement to ensure that they are tailored specifically to farm workers, such as including sublease situations where someone might not be the main tenant on a lease or have an informal lease or exchange their labor for their housing. And so to make sure that those situations are also included when we're considering protections for tenants. The third is to adopt more proactive rental inspections and licensing programs. Right now, the code enforcement process is complaint-driven, and so a complaint has to be filed before someone comes to inspect the home. So a proactive rental inspection program would allow the code enforcement to check on the conditions and make sure that people are living in habitable situations. And our fourth recommendation is to help advance community ownership models to promote permanently affordable and dignified farm worker housing. Home ownership is one of the ways to have stable housing, but that's very difficult for farm workers on their current income. So to have organizations that can help them achieve partial home ownership through community ownership models is one way to help them achieve home ownership dreams. And lastly, to empower farm worker administrative bodies to help implement these recommendations. The County of San Mateo has a Farm Worker Advisory Commission, for example. There's also the Farm Worker Health Board. So there are different farm worker administrative bodies that are working to sharpen recommendations for bodies such as this. And we believe by further empowering them, they can help make sure that any legislation that does pass really is tailored specifically to farm workers. And for now, actually, I will pass it. Voy a invitar a presentar un poquito. I'm going to invite my colleagues Uriel and Vicente to speak a little bit about their experiences. Uriel, ¿quieres primero? Okay, great.
So Uriel is going to provide his comment or his testimony, and then I'm going to provide you with the site translation after he's finished.
Buenas noches, miembros del Consejo. Mi nombre es Uriel y soy un trabajador agrícola que vive en HMBCC Bay. Aunque mi historia personal no está incluida en el informe presentado por Amanda, las experiencias que se comparten en ese informe son muy parecidas a la mía y a las de muchos otros trabajadores agrícolas. Estoy aquí esta noche para pedirles que sigan abogando por viviendas verdaderamente accesibles y yo tuve que esperar varios años para poder vivir en el proyecto de viviendas accesibles en la que estoy ahora. Y sé que muchas otras personas todavía están esperando. También les pido que mientras continúan con sus esfuerzos para ampliar el acceso a la vivienda accesible, protejan los derechos de todos los inquilinos. Tengo muchos amigos que pagan renta muy alta y para poder tener un techo se ven obligados a vivir con varias personas en espacios pequeños. Esta comunidad es hermosa y todos compartimos el mismo sueño, tener un hogar estable y criar a nuestras familias aquí. Gracias por su tiempo y por escucharme.
Good evening, council members. My name is Uriel, and I'm a farm worker and resident of Half Moon Bay. While my personal story isn't included in the report presented by Amanda, the experiences shared in the report are very similar to mine and those of many fellow farm workers. I'm here tonight to ask you to continue advocating for truly affordable housing. I had to wait several years for the affordable housing project I now live in, and I know many others are still waiting. I also ask that, as you continue your efforts to expand affordable housing, you protect the rights of all tenants. I have many friends whose rent is too high, and in order to afford a place to live, they are forced to share small spaces with multiple people. This community is beautiful, and we all share the same dream to have a stable home and raise our families here. Thank you for your time and for listening. So once again, he's going to provide his comment or his experience, and I'm going to provide you with the site translation afterwards.
Buenas noches a todos, miembros del concilio y demás personas que nos acompañan. Mi nombre es Vicente, también soy trabajador agrícola y vivo en Hammond Bay. Mi historia tampoco está en el informe que compartió Amanda, pero quiero que sepan que muchos de nosotros en la comunidad hemos tenido dificultades con las rentas altas. Ahora tengo la suerte de vivir en una vivienda accesible, pero sinceramente, si ese proyecto de vivienda no existiera, no sé dónde viviría mi hijo y yo. Las rentas aquí son demasiado caras. Estoy aquí esta noche para pedirles, por favor, que sigan luchando por más viviendas accesibles. Necesitamos hogares donde la renta no sea tan alta. El costo de vida hace que sea muy difícil para familias como la mía salir adelante. Quiero que mi hijo crezca aquí y que algún día pueda ir a la universidad. Este es un lugar hermoso y todos queremos tener la oportunidad de construir una vida aquí. Gracias por su tiempo y por escucharme.
My name is Vicente. I'm also a farm worker and resident of Half Moon Bay. My story isn't in the report Amanda shared either, but I want you to know that many of us in the community have struggled with high rent. I'm lucky now to live in affordable housing, but honestly, if that housing didn't exist, I don't know where my son and I would be living. Rent here is just too expensive. I'm here tonight to ask you to please keep fighting for more affordable housing. We need homes where the rent isn't so high. The cost of living makes it hard for families like mine to get by. I want my son to grow up here and one day go to college. This is a beautiful place, and we all want the chance to build a life here. Thank you for your time and for listening.
And now if there are any questions.
Questions or comments from council? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this study. And thank both of the speakers tonight for sharing their story. I know it's very difficult in times when our city is suffering from financial difficulties, a structural deficit, makes it difficult to do just about anything. But I'm hoping that the work that we've put in up to this point has not been wasted, and that we can continue to move forward with our rental registry and with our minimum wage and all of the measures that we've made to try to get affordable housing built in this city. I think everyone deserves a home. It's a human right, and we need to remember that. Even though it's difficult right now financially, it's very easy to get sidetracked and think, well, we've got other issues, but this is basic. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I attended the exhibit, the art exhibit that you guys had, and I put the little earphones and listened, and the room was very energized. It was excellent done. I shared the photos on my Facebook. I got a lot of people on the other side of the hill that are friends that took to those photos, and lots of likes and a lot of understanding of what's going on. I think that kinds of things that we did or you guys did should continue on. That day was special for those that went to it. You saw those photos, they were amazing. I got a chance to meet some of the farm workers that were there and took pictures with them. I asked if it was okay, and it was a great event, and I thought that was a really good thing that you guys put on, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Just a comment. Thank you to the farm workers for all the back-breaking work that you do every day to support the food that we enjoy here on the coast side. A lot of us would not do that work. You do that work, and you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. Thank you again for all you do.
Thank you.
I agree with everything that's been said, and often the public isn't always aware of what housing conditions look like, and when they are aware, they're shocked and surprised, and I'm glad we have these opportunities to share people's stories, because these are folks who are part of our community, and they work on our farms. There's also people who work in our stores, restaurants, and very often live in very, very challenging conditions for their families, and their children are in our schools. So again, thank you for being here this evening, delivering the study, and we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank you. And I hope you take the time to read the report in full. We have a policy report that has the policy recommendations, as well as a report that is just the interviews, a summary of each of the interviews that we did with each of the 22 farm workers, detailing their housing and immigration stories. And we hope you take the time to read them and appreciate the beautiful art that went alongside them. So thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Amanda. Take care.
Can I ask, is that a report that is online, or is that something you could send? Okay, excellent.
Great, thank you. Next item is Mayor's announcements of community activities and community service. Coming right up is our end-of-year summer party in Carter Park, and that'll be a great event. For those of you who haven't seen the new Carter Park, I think you'd be pleased. It's going to be some great music, and it's on October 5th from 12 noon to 5 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, the 4th, so Saturday the 4th.
Yeah, check that, Saturday the 4th. I have Saturday here, but for some reason I have the 5th. Thank you. Stand corrected. Saturday, October 4th. Great. So be there, and I know the weather will cooperate with us. Also, just advance notice, let me make sure I get the exact right dates. Pumpkin Festival is coming up. Is that the third weekend in October, I believe? And that's October 18th and 19th. So I want to make sure everyone knows, October 18th and 19th is the Pumpkin Festival. Highly recommend, do all your shopping the Friday before. There will be traffic. So, and always a great event here, we're proud of it, and there'll be a pumpkin way off. So, I know it's hard to believe, time's flying, and here we are at Pumpkin Festival again. So, anything else to add regarding that event? No? Okay, great. Okay. Report. report out from our recent closed session. Two things. We moved the start of our performance review for our city manager to October 21st. And the other item is that the council has voted to discharge our legal firm, Shute, Mahali, and Weinberger. We're grateful for their years of service with us. And we'll be moving on to looking for another law firm. That was carried on a 3-2 vote, that decision this evening, with myself and Council Member Penrose voting no. Oh, and that will, so that we will be ending our services will cease with that firm with 90 days after the signing of our notice of discharge. I think I got that all. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, next item on our agenda is our city manager's updates to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We actually only have one update tonight. The first item, the Senior Coastsiders volunteer opportunities. Senior Coastsiders had a conflict come up and were not able to attend. We'll see if they might make that same announcement in 2 weeks or 3 weeks at our next meeting. So our only item is, again, Julissa Acosta to talk about some work we've done with a nonprofit Abode related to the farm workers that were displaced by the shooting back in 2023.
Thank you, Matthew. Some of you may remember, after the shooting that occurred in 2023, the county stepped up to provide housing, interim housing for the displaced farm workers. After those funds were expired, the city collaborated with a couple of our nonprofit and philanthropy agencies to secure funding, and City Council also provided $300,000 from our Affordable Housing Fund back in March 2024 to continue providing interim housing while Stone Pine Cove was being built. Those funds allowed us to provide interim housing through April 2025 this year, along with $464,000 that we received from philanthropy. And we knew at that time, earlier at the beginning of this year, that the funds needed to be stretched a little bit more because the development wasn't going to be completed until sometime in the summer. And we came back to you earlier this year in March and asked for another $300,000 from our Affordable Housing Fund to continue providing housing support to our farm workers. At the same time, staff indicated that we were also going to seek support from philanthropy again. And I want to do a big shout out to my colleague and my partner in this endeavor, our former housing coordinator, Mike Noche. We said to engage with philanthropy and secure $225,000 from Sobrato Foundation, Sobrato Philanthropies, and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Those $225,000 allowed us not to touch any of the affordable housing funds that we have requested from you earlier this year. So that is the big update that I have for you. The $300,000 that we asked for back in March remain untouched in our affordable housing fund. And all of the farm workers that were displaced from the shooting have already moved into Stone Pine. Some of them are here. And so you can see that for yourselves. We just want to acknowledge our partners in this. Sobrato Philanthropy, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, the Grow Foundation, the Latino Community Foundation, Sandhill Foundation, and our partners who collaborated really closely to deliver this program and provided support and housing assistance at both services and COSI Hope. So, any questions? Thank you.
I have a question. So how many at the Stone Pine have moved in, and how many units do we have available still?
So far, from the displaced group, 12 families moved in. Those were the ones that opted to move into Stone Pine Cove. Some opted not to move into Stone Pine Cove for other reasons. That is from our original group from displaced farm workers. After those 12 families moved in, there is another round of contract signing for 6 more families. And we hosted another community meeting for the next round of applicants that were eligible earlier in August. So because the process takes a little bit of time in terms of turning in documentation and all of that, and for the county to review, it takes a couple weeks for them to fully get approved and all the documents ready. But we're hopeful. We're probably halfway full, and maybe have about 20-something units available still that are probably in process of getting filled.
And I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just share. They took all the applications and enclosed it. I believe there were several hundred
Over 300,
applications
over
received.
300.
So it's not that people can still apply. The application period's closed, and they're working through their list of priorities to continue to allow additional families in. Does that make sense?
I'm just saying that we have 20, let's just say roughly 20 units available, and we have people that need them. We just have to sit and wait until it gets evaluated and goes through the process?
Well, again, the application period is closed. It was oversubscribed by, 5 times, 10 times. From the applicant list, the county is going through the process of screening people in, and they hope to have all of them occupied this fall. So if a person is not applied, they will have to wait until there's enough turnover to create an opportunity in the future.
All the 20 taken in this fall?
Yes, all 46 actually. It's total 46 units available for farm workers. So right now we're about halfway full, and the rest of them will probably be occupied by the fall. Yeah.
Good news, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I think we had one more question, Julissa, from Vice Mayor.
Just a quick question. So who's managing the process of filling the units? Is it the county that's doing that?
It is the county who's doing that. They're reviewing, like Matthew said, there's priorities that were set from the very beginning of the application opening. Obviously, the displaced group from the shooting had priority number 1. Those displaced by the task force from the housing inspection from the county had priority number 2, and then it was open to the general public for farm workers. And so based on that, based on need or being at risk of displacement was also priority. So the county's evaluating, set the different applications into different groups, and they're overseeing all that process in terms of eligibility, making sure they're farm workers, they live in San Mateo County, all of that. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
One last question. So we had a few families in the Zambella house. They're no longer at the Zambella house where they retrofitted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There were households that were housed there that have transitioned into Stone Pine Cove. Correct.
Thank you, Julissa, appreciate it. Okay, we're next going to move on to public forum. Some of you may or may not be familiar with public forum, but just to review, for new folks, people can participate both in the room and online. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. We have a timer up here. There'll be 2 warnings. The first tone means you have 30 seconds left, right? So after 2.5 minutes, you'll hear a tone, and then 30 seconds later, you'll hear a second tone. And at that second tone, that's it. So your time will be up. The other thing, it's a best practice. We ask that people actually not applaud after someone speaks. The reason for that is it can be sometimes, people coming up for the first time could be nervous, and it could be intimidating if people are applauding some people and others. It's not a contest. It's an opportunity for people to come up, participate in our democracy, have their say, and not feel uncomfortable and intimidated. So we ask that you not applaud. Okay, with that, our first speaker tonight is Councilmember Deborah Penrose.
I am speaking tonight as a citizen of Half Moon Bay. I am speaking out as an elected official and as an angry and frightened human being. Donald Trump, left unchecked, is going to destroy everything that we hold dear in these United States. He has already shown unequivocally that he has no respect for the rule of law, that he is willing to jail the folks that you vote into office, that he will never allow a question to be asked from a public official that may have the potential to put to the question his agenda. And what will the consequences of your disobedience be? He will federalize the National Guard. We see it. Usurping the power of your elected governor, he will call in the armed forces. He is saying, be quiet, shut up, or if you defy me, I will come after you, hunt you down, and make you pay. I know that my tone of voice and some of the words that I'm using tonight may seem extreme, but we do not have the luxury of mincing our words and pussyfooting around. This is not a contest between Democrats and Republicans. It's not a struggle between progressives and conservatives. What we have now is a battle between what is lawful and what is criminal, between what is sane and what is crazy, between what is good and what is evil. When democracy dies, be careful which side you are on. If it's the wrong side, you and your children and your parents and your neighbors will lose your power, lose your right to choose, lose your right to speak out, and be in dire peril of losing your freedom and your life. If you are an elected official, speak up now. It's the time to protest. It is critical that every elected official who swore to uphold the constitutions of the United States of America and of California show that they are willing to defend them. If you live in the United States of America, please speak up. All of our voices need to be heard. Please protest against what you feel is wrong or dangerous. Do not allow evil to triumph because you were afraid to speak.
Thank you, Deborah. Our next speaker is Jimmy Benjamin.
Thank you and good evening. Jimmy Benjamin, 400 Pilarcitos Avenue. Let me start by saying thank you, Councilmember Penrose, ditto. People come frequently asking for something from you or complaining about something that you did or they think you should have done. I just thought I'd take a minute today to say thank you for something that you did at our last rendezvous, which was September the 2nd, I know because it was my wedding anniversary. We enjoyed a little time together talking about the problem of the disturbance of fireworks here in Half Moon Bay. And Captain Chichov was here as well. And I thought that Mayor Brownstone, you did a very nice, very artful job of emphasizing that there was a very significant fine. And City Attorney Ingberg did a very nice job of reminding the public it was a $1,000 fine. And since that time, it's been quiet. I've heard a couple of fireworks go off, but they've been much, much lower. I'm hoping that we can continue to make people realize that it's a nuisance, it's dangerous during fire season like we're having now, and it's profoundly uncivil. It's just another kind of incivility like the ones, perhaps modest compared to some of the ones that Councilmember Penrose mentioned. But we are grateful for your support in overcoming that and hope that with your continued interest, we will get back to a level of reason about those things. I did have an item on the agenda. I won't speak to it now. I put my thoughts in writing, so I will spare you another 3 minutes and give you back that gift of time. But I am here if you want to speak to me about it. I'll stick around and be glad to answer questions. Thank you.
I'm glad you spoke up. I called the sheriff at 1:45 Sunday morning because somebody blew off 20 fireworks right in front of my home.
Nice.
Yes. And they came out and retrieved the spent fireworks box and took that away. But calling the sheriff's office was a really good idea, and I filed a formal report. And I recommend all of you do that. So there were two, actually, on Sunday morning. And it was quite noisy, so.
Yeah, it was about that distance away from your house to where we live near the sand plant. That makes sense, and I'm sorry that you endured it. I hope that everyone will continue to be interested and call. I know there's been a lively next-door discussion. It is not the sound of freedom, it is the sound of irritation. Thank you.
Jimmy, I want to say thank you for bringing that forward also, and Reddick, the same thing happened. There's a follow-up on that, is when I called Chichoff, or I should say Chichoff, I actually texted him, but I called that number that Captain Chichoff gave us, the two numbers. And what happened was, is I heard Zoya called also, and there was numerous 10 other calls that came through, but it went to a busy signal, and nobody picked up the phone. So I tried the other phone, and it didn't work. So I gave Chichoff all the details of what happened. He said there was a phone issue. Eventually, the first number worked, and then somebody did call me back, but I thought it was a 10-minute delay before any grabbed the phone. So when there is a problem that you can't get through to that, non-emergency number, which I put on my phone, and I randomly use it now, just to make a call, say something's not right, or somebody was in the middle of a median and sitting there on Highway 1. I called, and they went out and took care of it. But if you're not getting through, make sure you talk to the dispatch and tell them how much time it took, and tell them that it was busy, because they said they've been having problems and are working on the phone system. So don't give up. Keep trying.
Yeah, thank you. So the two responses to that. First, I've had quite a few members of the public ask me whether if that happens, they should call the emergency number. And I don't know whether Captain Chichoff.
It was a non-emergency. I labeled it in my phone. It's a so there's somebody taking the phone, and, because it's not like somebody's dying. You're just putting a request that, hey, something, and then they actually went out and fielded the issue. And that's the two numbers that we received at the last meeting.
And then second, when I went to the county website, I saw a different number, which when I called, I was able to get through on that number. And, we have a couple of numbers. I didn't post that more broadly, but if people want to comment and they can on those numbers, if you look on the county website, there was another number to call.
The thing is, we do have he took the idea that I threw out there. It does state on the signs when you come into 92 and Highway 1, fireworks are illegal, $1,000 fine. So he took the idea and ran with it, and it's still posting to this day. I'm sorry to hear that you had an issue, but we've got to stay on top of this because it is disruptive. It's after hours, you're in bed, you're sleeping, and all of a sudden, boom, and the dog's freaking out. So we all have that same issues. And I actually went out and looked to see, because Chichoff gave us some clues. Look for the plume of smoke, then you kind of know where it's happening. So I gave him every detail that I could when I called that number.
I'll just share, please use the other numbers if you can't get through. It is very appropriate to call 911. You're reporting a crime. That's totally appropriate. So.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks for the conversation on this. Yeah, it is a crime. And the reason it's a crime, it can cause great damage, especially in terms of fire. Okay, thanks, everybody. Our next speaker is Harvey Rarbach.
Good evening, Council. I want to second everything that Councilmember Penrose just said. I think we have to speak out. If we're not speaking out, we're complicit. The other thing that I wasn't expecting to say tonight, but I just learned, Catherine Engberg and Shoot Mahali did wonderful work when I was on the council, and I'm grateful for everything they did, and I'm sorry that they're apparently going to go, but that's where I'm coming from. I'm grateful to them. I wanted to speak about two local matters that I think have somehow gotten under the radar, and we need to be aware of them. The first is, we heard tonight about Spanish Heritage Month and then about farm worker housing. It's time to do something about it. And the council can collaborate with Mercy Housing to get 555 Kelly built. That is dignified housing for senior farm workers. It will have 40 units, and it's a way to make concrete that we really care about our senior farm workers, and not just talk about giving them awards, but real housing that is dignified and worthy of their coming to live in them. The other item that I don't want to lose is the momentum that we had about trying to get sewer and water on the coast side to be a more rational way of dealing with our environment. And that is to have a single special district that would encompass all three of the current agencies and include the local sewer contracts to actually have a single unit, a single way of dealing with water and sewer. And I think one of the advantages of doing that would be we'd finally be able to get recycled water, which would be a big boon for the coast side and for the environment. And we could stop the horrible bickering that has been going on in the last 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Our next speaker is Joaquin Jimenez.
Good evening. My name is Joaquin Jimenez. I've been a resident of the coast for over 38 years now, and I've seen the changes. I've seen the need of the coast. I've seen the neglect of the coast side. We are missing a lot of things here in our community. As you heard today, there was a study on the housing for the farm workers for low-income community. There's something that's been going on for several years. You know, just heard about the need of water, running water at the school, at the high school in Pescadero. 1993, I believe, was the last year that that water was actually drinkable in Pescadero. There's a great need, and we are being neglected by the county. Today, September 16th, I would like to announce that I'm going to be running for County Supervisor, District 3 of San Mateo County. And I want to represent the community of the coastside that has been neglected by San Mateo County. There's a great need. They are neglecting our community. They're neglecting our low-income community. They're neglecting our farm workers. They're neglecting our farmers. They're neglecting our ranchers. They're neglecting the environment. And I want to represent the coastside. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. Our next speaker is Kristlyn Geet.
Crystal Geet, CEO of the Coastside Chamber. Over the summer, our Advocacy and Legislation Committee has been grappling with how our immigrant community has been so adversely affected by the policies coming out of our national government. And they have written you this letter, and I would like to give a shout out to Rita, who is on our board. Dear honorable members of the City Council, we write to express our deep concern regarding the ongoing immigration enforcement actions in our state and region, and to affirm our unwavering support for the immigrant community that are the backbone of our coastside economy and culture. We stand firmly against the deportation tactics currently being employed by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement particularly those that are predatory in nature and that spread fear among the people of our community. We believe our shared prosperity depends on standing up for the values that make the Coast Side and San Mateo County and the communities within vibrant, inclusive, and a welcoming place to live and do business. As such, we affirm the following principles: inclusiveness and support of all immigrants. We support policies and practices that ensure dignity, respect, and opportunity for immigrants regardless of their status. Recognition of our history. Our Coast Side was built on the labor, talent, and tenacity of our immigrants. That legacy continues to shape our community and our successes today. Equal rights in the workplace. We advocate for equal pay and treatment for all workers, regardless of their country of origin. Condemnation of harmful enforcement practices. We denounce the aggressive and fear-inducing tactics currently used by ICE, which threatens the families, disrupts local business, and undermines the trust of our institutions. Acknowledgement of immigrant contributions. Immigrants are vital to our agricultural, our service, our hospitality, all of the small business sectors, and their daily contributions are essential to our economy and the well-being of our community. The Coast Side Chamber stands with the City Council and the Board of Supervisors in opposing the unjust deportation practices and in protecting the dignity and safety of all residents. We work together to ensure that our communities remain a place where everyone has the opportunity to live, work, and thrive, free from fear and discrimination. Thank you for your leadership and your commitment to justice and inclusivity. Sincerely, Nate Surdy, Advocacy and Legislation Committee, and on behalf of all Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristin. I don't think there's anyone online, right? Correct?
No hands are raised.
Okay, thank you. Concludes and closes our public forum for this evening. We will now move on to our consent calendar, and I believe there's a request for one item to be pulled. Is that right? No, not pulled. You just gave us, got it. Thank you. Okay. Therefore, I would entertain a motion to adopt our consent calendar. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I move that we waive the reading of resolutions and ordinances, that we approve the minutes of the September 2nd, 2025 special meeting, that we approve the minutes of the September 2nd, 2025 regular meeting, that we adopt a resolution adopting the updated records retention schedule for the city of Half Moon Bay, that we adopt a resolution directing staff to submit a grant application to the San Mateo County Transportation Authority, TA, for measures A and W highway program funds for $11,700,000 in grant funding from the TA with a $1,300,000 local match for the Highway 1 Main Street to Kehoe Avenue project, authorizing the city manager or their designee to execute a funding agreement or memorandum of understanding and any amendments with the TA to encumber measures A and W highway program funds should the applications be successful, committing to the completion of the project, including the required local funding contribution of $1,300,000 should the application be successful, certifying that any funds awarded by the TA will be used to supplement existing funds for program activities and will not replace existing funds or resources, and authorize the city manager or their designee to take any other actions necessary to give effect to this resolution and execute applicable amendments. That we accept the warrants list for the month of August 2025.
Second? I'll second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Nagengast?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Mayor Brownstone?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Just make sure. Okay, no items under ordinances and public hearings this evening. We'll now move on to resolutions and staff reports. We'll begin with item 10A, financial report for the quarter ended on June 30th, 2025, and we'll have a staff report. Thanks again.
All right, good afternoon, Honorable Mr. Mayor, Council, and members of the public. Today I'm going to be presenting the financial report. We do these presentations quarterly, and this is for the fourth quarter that ended in June, which is also the end of our fiscal year. Pretty high-level summary, but the report in the agenda packet has more detail and analysis. It should be noted, though, that every number you see here is unaudited, so the city has a best practice. We obtain an independent auditor every year to come and take a look at our financial books. It's a pretty long process. It starts in about May, it ends in about November. What the independent auditor does, they take a look, they verify the accuracy, the fairness of the numbers being presented, and issue an opinion. And then in December, we report to council what the final numbers are and then deliver the actual audited report. The numbers here are the end of year. They just haven't had that final blessed by that auditor. Starting with revenues, transient occupancy tax, we had budgeted 8.3 million and we received about 9.6. So we finished off much better than what we planned for and what we anticipated by about 1 million. I have a slide right after this to talk more about TOT in particular, but essentially TOT looks like, for at least for last year, was better than what we budgeted for and what happened the previous year. Property taxes, we budgeted 3.9 million. We received 3.7, so we came up short by about 170. This is vehicle and lieu fees. As council knows, there's a bit of a point of contention between the state and the county on these fees. The state has to explicitly fund these fees to us, and technically it's not guaranteed, but the past few years they've been making the cities whole, but there's still contention around it. We did eventually get our allocation, but it came in after the end of the fiscal year. So it's not reflected here, but you'll see it in the first quarter of our current fiscal year. Sales and use taxes, we budgeted 2.9 million. We received 3.6, which is about 600K more than what we had budgeted for. The gain here is twofold. Our normal sales tax base was a bit better than what we planned for, but also Measure R, our sales tax increase, went into effect April 1st. So we started to receive those funds, and of that 600K extra, 400 of that roughly is Measure R. Other revenues, we budgeted 5.6, we received 6.4, which is about 800K more. This is mostly development fees, like building fees, engineering, planning fees, and then a portion is also for interest and investment income. Overall, we received 23 million in revenues, about 2.5 million more than what we budgeted for. Again, with a big chunk of that coming from TOT. So on the screen here is TOT. This chart is our revenues by the month. The darker teal columns are this year. The gray columns are both what we budgeted for and also what we received last year. For budgeting purposes, we just always picked what we received in the prior year. That's been our MO for the past few years. As you can see, for the past 6 months, our TOT numbers have been coming in better than what we expected and what we experienced from the prior year. It's a bit of positive news, though we still don't know if this is going to be a long-term trend or if this is just a moment in time, but it is encouraging to see that it's doing better. On the expenditure side of things, we're going to come in under budget. The table on the screen details the budget by department, and you can see that most are under budget. Overall, we're going to be under budget by about $1.4 million. Half of that is salary savings. We've had vacancies throughout the year. Some of them we filled, some of them we did not. But in both scenarios, that gave us an opportunity to save some cash. Then the other half of the savings is just less spending overall, and that can be for a lot of different reasons that kind of just add up. It could be foregoing a initiative or a project, or finding new ways to cut back on some things, or rearrange departmental budgets. So between revenues and expenditures, you can see that flushed out, there's more cash that's been flushed out, as far as we've have about $2 million in revenues more, and we came in under budget by $1 million. So that's that's a reasonable chunk of change that that is going to be that hasn't been incorporated into the budget. What that means is that those monies that we weren't planning for that showed up anyways, they fall into our fund balances. This slide here details what our fund balances are, what we budgeted for, what actually happened, and what it means going forward. The table is has a lot of numbers on the table, but for completeness, but just going to go at a very high level. The first column of numbers is what we budgeted for, and at the very bottom of that column, unassigned, we had budgeted that we would have about $900K in unassigned funds. The second column, the gray column, is what actually happened. Our revenues were much more than what we anticipated. Our expenditures were less. Because of that, our unassigned at June 30th, this past June, is about almost $5 million. Now, it's important to note that while we were going through the budgeting process for this current fiscal year, we had already put some of those unassigned funds to use. So as it flows through all the way to today, as far as our budget and what it looks like going forward, that last column is our current budget that we're in. We have reserves at 8.8, and we have we estimated unassigned funds at 3.3 in June. This does provide a bit of an opportunity. 3.3 is a considerable amount of change. Council could decide to put that back into reserves. Council could decide to let us sit, but it is there. The default recommendation from staff was just to put it in reserves, but that is, of course, ultimately a council decision. If the $3 million were to be put back into reserves, the reserves would be almost close to fully funded, about 49%. So looking even further ahead, what does this mean for the deficit? So the last time we did a forecast was during the budgeting process, and the number that came out for next year, 26-27, was about $3 million of a gap. Now, that forecast was done back in spring, early spring, late March, early April. And it did not have the data that we have today. So the outlook has changed, has the potential to change. We have pending items that may change our financial outlook, the big one being TOT. Having it be up by $1 million is, if that were to hold, that would change how we decide going forward on things. Sales tax, we forecasted, or we built into our budget a pretty conservative number. So there's potential for bandwidth there. And our fee study, council recently approved increasing our fees to match our costs. And we built in a pretty low, I would say, conservative number on that increase. And so there's bandwidth there. The only question is we don't know how much and if it's going to hold is into reference with TOT. So we're in a bit of a holding period right now, with the big question being, do our revenues pan out, and if so, how much? Ultimately, though, I think a deficit next year is still very likely, but depending on revenues, if they continue as they are, it may mean the difference between service level impacts or making more manageable adjustments. Don't really know, but I think mid-year would be a critical time to review again. So with that, I will happily take any questions, but the recommendation is as follows: accept the financial report for the quarter ended on June 30th, 2025.
Thank you, Ken. Questions from council? Yeah, please.
I don't have questions. I have just a comment. Is that okay now? Or?
Yeah, well,
We may
I'd like to
wait
start
till-
with questions. Does anyone have any clarifying questions? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Revenue is out of our control, right? Unless we are up all night on Amazon, maybe that helps us get some more in here. But I think expenditures is something that's within our control. And I want to acknowledge and commend staff for tightening the belt. And I want the community to know that it's a concerted effort, and I'm acknowledging staff has done that. And I hope moving forward, we're going to look at having the right staffing to be able to complete our services, and hopefully it also addresses the structural deficit. But I want to make sure, it's recognized, and, we still have this looming, and you're exactly right. Mid-year is going to tell us more. We'll get another data point, and we got to keep working, and hopefully we find the right balance to get us moving onward. But I want to thank staff.
Well, I agree with Paul. I'm also hesitant to shoot good news in the foot. This is good news concerning at least our revenue increases, being under budget by 1.4 million, having 2.6 million more in TOT and sales and use tax. So, yeah, that's $4 million to the plus side, and we'll see where we are and how that impacts our the projected $3 million deficit. But I think that should also give some, a little more calmness to the process, that we're not just headed in a downward slope. In fact, we're beginning to look positive, but of course you can never predict what's around the corner. So I'm glad that we can increase our reserves as well, potentially. So great. Thanks for the great report, Ken.
Yep.
I think that's it.
I have one question. On the property tax, Ken, what was the reason why that was down 4%? It's like $169,000. You would think property tax, you just pay it, right?
Yeah, it's, so year over year, like base property taxes, like homeowners, that's up year over year. There's another section of property tax called vehicle in lieu fees, or DMV fees, when you pay
Right.
your
Okay, you
registration.
did cover that, I'm sorry, you did.
No, it's okay.
So
But
that
yeah.
was the reason on that.
Yeah, there's disagreements, so it goes to the state, and then the state gives it to the county, to the cities. And there is contention about who gets what, and it's a fight every year about it. So that makes up that difference.
And then on the legal fees, it was like 18% off. What were you were anticipating a certain, what was the big jump, the 200,000 jump that, what were we, was it the sand plant thing or something, or?
It's going to be litigation.
Just in general, just we didn't know
Litigation,
about,
yeah.
okay. And then on the city clerk communications, on that one, what was, can you kind of run that by me? What you budgeted, because it was higher and then it was actual, so what caused it to go down?
So city clerk, we have a vacancy in city clerk, or we had one during the fiscal year. So the portion of that is going to be salary savings. And then also, in city clerk in particular, we hold a bit of so for elections, we don't know what our bill's going to be. And sometimes it can be 100K, sometimes it can be 10K. But we hold it at 100K in the budget.
And then on Public Works, we budgeted, a higher amount, and we're about 436 that we didn't use. So what, is there projects that we didn't get done, or just,
So
were we anticipating more and didn't do it?
Yeah, so the Public Works, their budgets don't have that much relation to CIP in that way. A big thing that Public Works holds is utilities. Sometimes more often than not, utilities is going to be hard to track. Supplies, and I guess a little bit of salary savings there as well. I don't know. I will have to get back to you on that.
And then on the sales taxes, because we were able to monitor the sales taxes, I brought that forward to the city manager a long time ago, and you said, we can't do that. And then we got a report. At some point, we were able to see the sales tax, because we can't see individual sales taxes, we can see an overall. And I hope to continue that so that we can see, because that's how I gauge my business, and I was mentioning it to Matthew, it was like when my sales tax is up at $6,000, I'm like, wow, we're doing pretty good, and it's down to 35, I'm not selling as much. So I can base how good my business is doing based on my sales tax. Are we going to continue doing that? Can we hone in on that sales tax like we are? Because that's up right now, and that's good.
When you say holding, like forecasting?
Well,
or
you
economic
had there was a forecast at some point that we could see that the sales tax had jumped up 4 or 6%, and it had gone up, which is a good indicator that people are coming to the shops, they're spending money in the sales tax.
Ken, I think what he's, sorry. I'll stand about here. I think what he's referring to was, I believe our sales tax consultant provided us a report that we were actually able to share, because sales tax information is proprietary, and only there's laws about who can actually see those numbers. But there was a summary report, and I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 6%.
Yeah, you'd like to be able to continue to see that.
That gave us an indicator that things were changing. That was a good positive thing.
The answer is yes, we can continue to provide that.
I would highly recommend
Yeah.
that. And then the other thing would be to continue doing what we're doing as a community and trying to enhance the downtown and create, as beautiful as we can to draw the people in, because we're seeing the numbers coming up. And if we can drive more people here, and, that's what's going to do it. We're already seeing that. Keeping it clean, looking nice, maintaining it, those kinds of things. I know we're short-staffed, but the formula is there.
Whoops, okay. Thanks so much, Ken. That was great. Really appreciate it. Our next item, item 10B, is the Opportunity Center of the Coast Side, and we'll receive a staff report first.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council and Community. My name's Karen Decker, Economic and Community Vitality Manager. The polka dots between Julissa and me are an unplanned happy coincidence. We've been together almost all day. It's causing a lot of giggles. No PowerPoint this evening. There was a pretty thorough presentation at the September 2nd council meeting on all things Opportunity Center. At that time, you received an update from staff and from the service providers that operate the Opportunity Center. The Opportunity Center is a first-of-its-kind service center. It serves co-siders who are looking for a job, as well as small businesses and entrepreneurs. It is funded through a $2.5 million grant from San Mateo County. And that grant and the providers and contracts that are funded through that grant are scheduled to sunset at the end of this month on September 30th. The city has the current space until January 14th, at which time the lease expires. And there are funding requests, irons in the fire, to the U.S. Senate, to San Mateo County, to philanthropic organizations. And so given that, staff is recommending that council fund the utilities and the janitorial services that would keep the lights on essentially and would allow for a longer runway to see if these potential funding opportunities can be realized. Also part of that recommendation is a potential extension of those current service contracts just in terms of term, not in terms of any additional funding. And staff believe that this will allow additional runway to unlock potential revenue streams that could maybe keep these services on the coast. I don't know if it would in its original form and at its location, but in some version. Earlier it was mentioned that the city manager's office and our housing coordinator has engaged with philanthropy a lot in the last few years. I've been with the city for 8 years, and I can think of about at least 6 philanthropic entities in which we've been successful at getting grant funds. And what I've observed as part of that secret sauce is a lot of times philanthropy or funders in general are looking around to see if there's any other skin in the game. I will say that I feel that philanthropy in general is interested in the coast. It has been acknowledged to me several times that we're considered a resource desert, that we are geographically isolated, and that it's hard for coastsiders to navigate the transportation to take advantage of a lot of other services that the Bayside or Peninsula side enjoys. They are aware that we are a town of 12,000 people, that we have limited reserves and a modest budget. So all that into account, I think that even a modest investment is a good faith effort that doesn't go unnoticed, but there's tremendous understanding in terms of the situation that we're in. So given all that, I'm happy to take any questions, field comments.
Questions, clarifying questions from council before we take public comment? Clarifying questions.
Can we take the money that you're asking and honestly take it out of the, what was the category it was coming, the money that was going to be asked? It's out of unhoused or something, isn't that right?
Yeah, you know, there are a few different options. One could be the Affordable Housing Fund. In the September 2nd presentation, I had referenced some precedent out of the city of South San Francisco. And that was one of the funding sources they were taking advantage of. And their justification was that upward mobility and access to a living wage mitigates homelessness. Another suggestion could be there is a likely cost savings from CSFA, not from the provider contracts themselves, but there's a technical assistance allocation that would be well within this price point. And yet a third option is just the general fund. So those were 3 potential streams that staff identified.
And in the report that this company did, what was it, Head and Heart Advisory, they actually state that deep into the report, how that upward mobility, getting people off the streets helps in our economy because they won't be in the hospital, they won't be, begging or whatever. It gives you all the lists of what it can do. So would that be something that the city is okay to do, is pull it because of that? Because the report kind of states that in this report.
Yeah, and through the mayor, back in, I think, 2019, the city actually adopted official criteria for utilization of the Affordable Housing Fund, and one of the criteria is homelessness prevention, and we believe this falls within that. So that's a justifiable use of the Affordable Housing Fund.
Is there clear language that it says that it does that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then what if the scenario, July, what is it, January 14th? Do we have, I think it's a great program. I think it works, but it's tough to do when we're in a budget restraint. That's the problem. Let's be real. But what I'm looking at is, too, we put a lot of money into that building. That's my wife's old place of office, right? You're renting it from her old bosses. And it looks immaculate. It's amazing what you guys have done. And there's a lot of time and money I could see put into that place. Decorating it, the chairs, everything in, ADA approved and all. The only thing is it needs an elevator for upstairs if you want to do that. But you guys didn't, I don't even think you're using upstairs. I'm looking at how much money we put into that building. And what are we gonna do? Do we know what the costs are gonna be to clean it out?
So the city is the tenant. We were given the grant from the county to organize and lead this pilot. Obviously, the operation of it has taken place through the service providers and the chamber who manages on site. Everything that's been invested into that came through that county grant, and you're correct. We were frugal and thoughtful. I'll give an example. We needed to create some spaces for the different providers to have a little bit of privacy. And we looked at building offices, building partitions, and Crystalline from the chamber pointed us to these essentially giant Legos. And those are not fixtures. Those can be removed and repurposed somewhere else. They've functioned very, very well. There's a lot of that in the facility that can be repurposed somewhere else, and then there's a lot, that has to be left behind. The kitchen was reconfigured to make it ADA compliant, some other work that was paid for by the landlord, and some that was paid for through the grant. At your last meeting, we brought forward a policy about disposing of surplus items, and part of that thinking was, as this program winds down, we'll eventually, whether it's in the next month or in December, or if funding comes through and this can continue over a longer term, maybe down the road, at some point we'll have to figure out what to do with all of the non-fixtures that are built to the building, and we'll come with some recommendations about what we think needs to happen, whether it gets sold, donated to nonprofits that continue to provide this service, whether the city can use some of this in our own programs. So some of it will be kind of lost to or gained by the landlord. Others will, there'll be opportunities to reuse it to serve the community.
Costs and labor of taking, disassembling and all that stuff. Do we have the resources to do it? Because we're already straining.
I think that'll be dependent on how it gets distributed. So that'll all be part of a plan that we have until January 14th to figure out. And obviously, it depends on how things play out over the next couple of months.
To be clear, me bringing these topics up is not saying I want to go that direction. I'm one of those guys. I want to know where it starts, where it ends, and what ifs. And that's, I want it to be there. I want it to be thriving. I want people to use it. But if the numbers aren't there and it's costing us money, then it's not something that's viable for our city. So hopefully you can pull this off and get money and funding, but we also have to make sure that we have budgeting for dismantling.
Okay. We will now have public comment. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. Okay, we have two public. Maybe I'll go with online here. Sophia Lane.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sophia Lane. Thank you, Mayor, for mentioning and bringing me on here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As all of you know, I served our community as a school board member for several years, and I, before that, served in various global roles in the biomedical industry. Also, I served as a Coastside Recovery Initiative Task Force member, helping to formulate an economic development plan and set of recommendations coming out of the COVID pandemic. working alongside about 16 other incredibly talented and dedicated members, all local and all of whom cared and continue to care deeply about the coast side, we remain committed to the plan and recommendations we helped develop. They're perhaps more important now than ever. You've seen the data, the legacy industries in the coast side, ag and hospitality are, continue to have challenges, and now we face new disruptions from various federal and other actions on healthcare, on environmental protections, on safety, and of course, on the economy. We need to have new opportunities and new jobs that are higher demand, higher paying, and attractive to the next generation of workers and the workers of today. The Opportunity Center of the Coast Side has been an incredible asset, and in a relatively short amount of time, they've had a real impact. I was really impressed to see that evaluation report that was mentioned earlier has already been completed, and the results are very promising from that first 15 or so months. And you all know I've been in the seat of having to make hard choices about where to invest limited resources. I totally get that. But from my view, given the amount of money that's being questioned, that's being proposed, this is not one of those hard choices. It's a very small but very wise investment of $10,000, which frankly, as you all know, on a $25 million budget is pretty much dust. That will allow staff to maintain the continuity of services until that next round of philanthropic funding comes through. And that small bridge is a bridge to a larger and very important opportunity to continue building a more vibrant and resilient economy and community in the months and years to come. Again, as we can reasonably expect challenges to increase for us all. So I hope you can please help us keep this momentum moving forward, not going backwards, and just allow staff and our partners to continue this important work and provide that bridge to the next round of funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Our next speaker is Nancy Fontana.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Is that okay? I'm not here to speak for or against the actual action of the $10,000 expenditure. I'm trying to wrap my head around this entire thing. The more of the funding, the money came from the county, but then you're talking about the city paying for stuff too. Has the city spent much besides this proposed $10,000? I'm not very familiar with I've read the reports, but not, I've read the staff reports, but not all the details of the other reports. Is there a total figure the city's spent on this at all?
We can answer that maybe when you're done.
When you're, okay. Yeah, there's things I just don't understand, and I did read the stuff, and so 10,000 doesn't sound like much of anything, but I'm trying to get the scope of this. The only thing I have to say, I think it's doing good things, and I do feel that it's important for the visitor center to have a presence on Main Street. I'm sort of questioning the amount of space that's been leased. And going forward, if it goes forward, a way to reduce if you're going to be dependent on philanthropic, having such a big space, you could really reduce the space. There's big rooms there that I don't see used that much. And the library is very close and has rooms available, and I believe people can also use the rooms here. So that would be a way to reduce costs going forward for a long term, because that's key. That's a storefront property. It's prime Main Street property. And having classrooms and meeting rooms, it doesn't seem a good use of that type of commercial space. So I don't have that much, I don't have an opinion about the $10,000. I just would like to know the totals. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to that in a moment in terms of some of the numbers, but But yeah, a lot of that space is used for ongoing training, and there isn't always a lot of space in this town for, large training sessions. So our next speaker is Eric Vittel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. My name is Eric Vettel, and I'm the director of the Coastside Venture Studio, the incubator. I'm also a proud citizen of Half Moon Bay, and I appreciate what you do as a council. I value what you do, but I don't envy you. Every decision filtered through a lens of fiscal responsibility. It can't be easy. At the risk of stating the obvious, voting against spending is often a fiscally responsible thing to do. But sometimes voting against spending can be fiscally irresponsible. I think that literally turning off the electricity and water at the OCC 4 months early might actually be a case for an example of fiscal irresponsibility. We have businesses, startups, jobs moving here to participate in the next cohort. They could have gone elsewhere, but they've committed to the incubator in Half Moon Bay. We have public and private funding requests under consideration right now. We are being watched. This decision is being watched. I understand that keeping the lights on at the OCC through January 14th is a difficult budget issue. As the director of the incubator, we hope, we want, and we aim to be part of the solution. But I hope we can keep the lights on. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Matthew, do you just want to say a word around, what's been the ongoing funding history for the center that Nancy Fontana had mentioned?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as has been mentioned, the county approached the city back in 2022, I believe, because South San Francisco had done something like this and kind of created a good model as part of COVID recovery, and they wanted to see this happen throughout other regions of San Mateo County. The county opened up a similar center in the North Fair Oaks neighborhood, which is unincorporated but adjacent to Redwood City, to kind of serve that area. And they asked the city if we could open and operate a similar center serving the entire coast side. And with that ask came a $2.5 million ARPA grant. The intent of that funding was to cover the operations and the services that would be provided, and a lot of work went into working with service providers to do that. Part of that funding included overhead for the city to offset our costs. We have not spent any direct dollars into this project. Our work has been at the staff level. We believe to date that overhead contribution from the county has covered our staff time. I've gotten some questions about specific numbers. We don't track our costs, our labor costs project by project. That is something we could explore in the future. For capital projects, we certainly do. For other projects, we have not in the past. But anecdotally, we don't believe, there was a big investment of time up front. At this point, where it's operational, it's a minimal amount of city effort. As has been pointed out, as part of the wind down, I think there will be some costs directly to the city, at least from a staffing standpoint, to wind things down as the grant expires at the end of this month. And we'll just have a little bit of reimbursement at the end of this month. So to date, no direct cost to the city. Going forward, obviously, there's the recommendation tonight to make a contribution and investment. And at the point that this center either closes down or relocates, there may be some cost to the city at the staffing level to ensure that it winds down properly. Again, a small investment compared to what the county has contributed towards this project.
Great.
We doing public comment?
Yeah, we're done. Oops. Public comment on this item is closed. So now we'll entertain comments or questions from council.
Yeah, I want to start with a comment. I think it's really important with these pass-through grants that we track our staff time that's not covered by, a grant overhead. we want to be able to count that as an in-kind contribution for sure, but we also want to have an idea about, when we accept a pass-through grant, what is the cost to us in doing that? We want to know that, up front, and then we want to compare that to the actual, cost of staff time over time. So I think tracking for these pass-through grants is really important. One question I have is, it seems to me that, so the pilot was a kind of a short pilot, but it seemed to me it would have been probably beneficial to initiate the search for philanthropy early on. It looks like that wasn't started until maybe this summer, and I'm just confused as to why we didn't it seems to me we should have been on 2 tracks operating the pilot, but if wanting to make it sustainable, looking for grants. So I think we might have wanted to start that process earlier. You want to comment about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Certainly, going into this, we knew that there was no guarantee that the county would continue funding it after the pilot period, and that there was no way the city would be the funder of a project like this going forward. And so it was always on our minds. As I mentioned up front, there's a lot of effort that goes into just getting up and running and getting operational. And certainly, again, we were having conversations, we were shopping at some of the service providers. Were already looking from the beginning for funding. We heard mentioned earlier, we were able to obtain a grant to hire a third-party evaluator. Part of shopping for sustainable funding is having data to support the outcomes, and so it really ramped up is that report, and obviously that report required data from the operations. So agree that on projects like this, and I think I shared last week, or at the last meeting, one of the lessons we've been learning about these pilot projects is being more thoughtful right up front that, hey, do we even want to jump into a pilot knowing that there's no guarantee of sustainable funding, and if we don't have some really good leads, maybe we need to think about that in the upfront decision-making. But I don't want you to think that staff or the service providers haven't been thinking about this all along. It just really ramped up when we had the data and got confirmation from the county that they were not going to be able to provide ongoing funding.
That's a good point. Yeah, it was kind of a compressed period. We did have the experience of the CARES program, so now we've had, 2. So we do want to be, careful in the future before, taking anything on like this, especially when it's not like core mission sort of stuff, right? It's kind of off book, if you will, So, I think I asked this question in advance of the meeting, but say they get rejected for their grants, say, middle of October. So then what? I mean, do we end up with an empty building for a few months, or?
I think that's a possibility. I think it'll depend on whether or not, there's lots of irons in the fire. And of course, the search isn't over. The search will continue. I know that pavement is being pounded trying to find sustainable funding. So I think it's something we've got to evaluate on an ongoing basis. And if we kind of reach that point where we've exhausted all of our opportunities, we will have to shift into just wind down and kind of cutting our losses and closing out the project.
And so to clarify too, the $10,000 covers utilities, and what does that include exactly? Is that like internet, Wi-Fi, all that stuff?
Internet, power, water, the janitorial services, supplies, general supplies for the facility. And again, that's a not to exceed $10,000. If we wind down early, we won't spend all of that money. So that's kind of worst case scenario.
But it doesn't include like cleaning out the building? Or if we can
No,
replace the
no,
carpeting?
that's more just about operations. And I want to be clear, in the contract, there was kind of a 12-month period where we'd be responsible for basically returning it to them like brand new. That period expired, and so normal wear and tear is expected here. We won't have to do as much. It's more just removing our things from the building, and the landlord will inherit a very nice space. I think it's been well cared for. It's been well used, but well cared for over the last 2.5 years as well.
And my last concern is, I'm a little bit concerned about the chamber. You know, they're feeling, it looks to me kind of like they're the orphan here. Like, what happens with the chamber? And where are they gonna go? And, you know, what is like the chamber board and everybody looking at in terms of making sure the chamber continues and isn't, you know, out of luck? I don't know if any thought has been given to the situation of the Chamber of Commerce.
I'm happy to let Crystal respond to that as well, but certainly as part of the planning for the future and looking for funding sources, they're part of that process. And yeah, we obviously need them to maintain a quality home here in our downtown and for that California Visitors Center. And we've had conversations, and I know it's something they're working on separately.
Yeah, I am concerned about losing that visitor center. You know, I think we're a visitor-serving community. You know, we need that visitor center and a robust Chamber of Commerce. I don't know, Kristlyn, do you have anything to add there, or?
So sorry. I was really trying not to have to say anything. We will still pay rent. We will still pay our portion of the Wi-Fi. We will still pay our portion of electricity. So the $10,000 that you would be approving takes care of everybody else, but it does not take care of us. Come September 30th, we lose $14,000 a month, and I most likely lose a valuable employee. Ever since January, we have been told time and time again that we are not considered a part of the OCC, and we are not considered a part of the funding. And I have been trying really hard to cheerlead from the sidelines and not bring forth the uncomfortableness that this has brought. And this has been really difficult.
I am sorry.
As most city council knows, we started down this journey 2019 when you approved funding for the chamber to start a business development center. And we worked very well with the city in bringing that into fruition. When the $2.5 million grant was brought forward by the county, we were very excited that that was going to turbocharge this effort. It has been an uphill climb, and we do not feel like we have been included in much of what has gone on. And I don't know what to do with that. Because I don't want to see the OCC go away. But as it sits, it does not include the chamber in everything that we've been told.
City Manager, do we have anything for the chamber? I mean, we have to think this through because we definitely need the chamber somewhere. I mean, this is just becoming a mess. This was not well planned out. It's been delayed. You guys got surveys here on how to, reach out to these people and see how good it worked. It wasn't done. It's way too late. This is so late, it's ridiculous.
So I think Crystal's correct that some of the funding, outreach that's been done is geared towards the service provision because that's what those funding sources provide. There is a request to the county to help support the operational side of things, which would be maintaining the facility and the operations. But not all funding sources can include that. And so it really depends on what comes through.
I'd like Karen to add a little more information here, please. Thanks.
I'd be happy to. And that's terrible. It's hard to hear that from such a longstanding partner. I will say that the philanthropic and governmental asks that the city has been involved in, which is nearly all of them, has included the chamber. It doesn't mean that it felt that way, but the actual numbers and documents submitted reflect operational costs that were provided by the chamber. That's the Sobrato ask, that's the county ask. It's not necessarily the congressional earmark because that was South San Francisco lid and they're not administered by a chamber. But any effort that the city has been involved in to showcase the costs and the price point have been provided by the service providers out of that center, including the chamber. A challenge is that the chamber is not a 501c3 status. So if you get a Sobrato or a CZI doing a tour of the Opportunity Center, they will more likely look at a job train or a Renaissance because of the nature of who they fund. They're not typically in the business of funding chambers. That said, the city still included the chamber at the chamber's price point to try to keep the framework and the model going. And in recognition that the chamber has been a longstanding supporter and participant in the Coastside Recovery Initiative, as an executive oversight member, as a task force member, in the realization of those 14 recommendations. And let's face it, all the providers in that space took a risk. They leaned into a really interesting, incredible opportunity, but a risk nonetheless. And all of them knew that this funding sunsets on September 30th. And these efforts have kept me and my staff up at night thinking how to sustain this incredible program. And the funding strategy meetings go back to January. Our evaluator, in his expertise, acknowledged that the OCC is the youngest of the three, and we needed an adequate runway in order to ask funders for an investment that is substantiated by data. We couldn't just take anecdotes. So I hope that rounds out some of the understanding. I think that all the providers are doing what they can. They've demonstrated that they each have their respective boards. To the question earlier about, will they just move out if they don't get the funding by October? They're all in different situations. One nonprofit has indicated that they have some reserves, that they're tightening their belts, that they're looking at dosage and staffing, and they're gonna do everything they can to have some version of what they offer on the coast because they've come too far to just pick up and go back to the peninsula. Another is not as sure of that, but they're talking to another potential site that they could potentially co-locate with, that they have synergy with, and the city is helping to broker that conversation. So from a city staff perspective, we are doing everything that we can to support all the service providers, and most importantly, the services, because this was filling an unmet gap. And I believe that that gap is as true as ever, and it would be a shame to see any of them pick up and not provide a service. That's including the chamber, but that's also including American Energy Society and Renaissance and Job Train.
Thanks, Karen, for background clarification.
Question. So I'm trying to understand this. So the chamber pays their own rent there? Is that how this works?
So the chamber was brought in to operate the center and be the point of contact for the center. And so the relationship between the city and the chamber for this project was that this would become the chamber headquarters. They would pay a pro rata share because Job Train, Renaissance, and the incubator were brought in to provide a service. The chamber is there to manage it, but they also are operating a chamber out of there. So there's a prorated rent that they pay. But then we also contracted with them for the operation of the center and to staff the center. And that's what Crystalline's referring to, is that contract for services is going away with all the other contracts for services. The ARPA funding that supported the staffing and the management of the site is going away. But we prepaid the rent through the ARPA funding through through January of next year. Part of that arrangement that was made at the beginning of this was that the chamber would pay their pro rata share of the rent.
I think, if I remember right, Kristen, you can remind me, it was like 3,200 or 3,600 with utilities is your portion of the chamber. So then they break it up into sections, and the total rent for the place, I don't know, but each individual pays their share.
No, the other service providers were brought in only to provide services, so they do not pay rent. They were contracted to come in and pay to provide services. So the situation is different for the chamber than for the other three service providers because they're only there to provide that service. They're not also operating a separate service line, which the chamber does as, as the Chamber of Commerce.
Right. So is there a difference between closing September 30th or staying open till January? I'm trying to understand. The chamber is there regardless to January, right? So is there what's the difference whether it shuts down, let's say it shuts down September 30th versus if it shuts down or there's lights on or kept? What happens? I know they need the grants, the three other groups need the grants, which the chamber aren't and never were a part of, and I sort of get that because not being a nonprofit. So I'm trying to, what's the consequences, I guess, whether it shuts to the chamber, and maybe it's a crystalline answer, if funding stops September 30th or January, but it sounds like, is the chamber in the same boat either way?
Before I respond, I know Karen stepped up to the mic, so I want to give her an opportunity to say
Thank
something.
you. I neglected to say something important, and then I will absolutely go back to your question. What the city is asking for tonight in this $10,000 to cover utilities and janitorial forgives the chamber's portion. So the chamber is not expected to pay utilities going into the last quarter. I conveyed this in an email to Crystalline and the secretary of the board. The rent is a different story, but the utilities that we're proposing tonight would be covered entirely.
So then going back to your question, council member, I think the chamber is in the most unique situation because this is their permanent residence. The other providers have other locations that they can return to or to close down their services here on the coast. This is the chamber's headquarters. They can remain in the space till January 15th, no matter what happens. I do think it becomes a challenge when it comes to utilities, and we would have to work through that with them. But yeah, I think their situation is different.
Right, and all the three service providers, notwithstanding the chamber, are housed and headquartered over the hill. They intentionally invested and expanded their footprint to serve the coast because we're considered a resource desert. So they don't have a permanent office here. They have offices, they have headquarters, but they're not stationed on the coast.
I'm aware of that, yes, you're right, and that makes it challenging, as you say, on the coast, and I know even trying to get job training makes it hard. A lot of folks have to go over the hill to get trained there, and that's what makes it unique, and I know the county, that's part of the probably challenge with the county, how to continue the funding. What I don't want to have is collateral damage to the chamber, because I'm trying to figure out the relationship here. And, so I think what I heard, chamber still pays rent, but they would, the ability to fund something would at least pay the utilities through January 14th. Otherwise, the chamber would have to be paid, if we ended September 30th, the chamber would have to pay their utilities.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
how this works.
Yeah. And obviously, the cost of all that would go down significantly if everybody else vacated the premises.
Right, but I'm just trying to, I don't want to burden. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So, we still have in front of us we can't solve all of this tonight. We still,
And I agree, and I wanted to say something about using affordable housing.
we have three sources that were mentioned, actually. So there's the affordable housing, right? General fund, but also technical funding from the CSFA grants, which, according to Karen, is not a problem, right? Just want to be sure that that's, yeah, okay. I would actually probably lean to that third option, is the technical funding from CSTA. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just my feeling, you know, you set precedents for the Affordable Housing Fund, but that money is luckily some excess there. That would be my recommendation, but interested in what others think.
Yeah, I am really opposed to using the Affordable Housing Fund. It's a very limited amount, and I don't want to draw it down any more than we've already drawn it down. So I'm fine with going with either of the other two options.
I don't support use of general fund or affordable housing fund. It would have to be from the CSFA.
That's, you know, after the report on September 2nd, I had a lot of conversations with various people about this, did my own analysis. I went back to when the city manager was a deputy city manager in 2019, when he brought this item about the guidelines for affordable housing. And even went through, and then there was even an item later on to spend it. And my concern was, you know, when we had the opportunity, we put general fund money into the Affordable Housing Fund, which is, you know, fantastic. But my point is we've been depleting it. And as mentioned, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't think, and I still will call it, I don't think the guidelines would allow this. I still call this utilities, you know, and I think, you know, we can maybe have that discussion, how that brings us to the actual, what the affordable housing, in my mind, was set up to do. But it's an interesting conversation tonight that I didn't necessarily see totally coming. I was totally against affordable housing fund. So if we move forward, I would look at that CFSA technical, which that money was, isn't that something we previously funded as part of when the nonprofits, we look at having the money and how it worked together. So council's allowed that. I would not, it's already been taken from our general fund. So technically it is general fund, but it's already been put aside. So, and I would not want to go after a new general fund because, again, I will still say I'm worried about our structural deficit. So I would look to using those funds.
Well, out of the gate, that's why I asked those questions, like, how can the Affordable Housing Fund work? And that's why I brought that forward. And I am definitely, don't want to do the general fund. I am in support with the CSFA program, technical assistance. That's how I would like it. I don't want to be digging out of any other buckets other than that one.
Great. Would someone like to make a motion? Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'll make a motion. Adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to fund utilities and janitorial services at the Opportunity Center of the Coast Side through January 2026 in an amount not to exceed $10,000 and to extend the professional service agreements with Job Train Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center, the Chamber of Commerce, and American Energy Society with a term ending January 15th, 2026. And I'll add 3, the funding for this $10,000 to come from our CSFA fund, technical funding.
I'll second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Nagengast,
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reddick,
Yes.
Mayor Brownstone.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everybody. Would you like a little break? We were supposed to take a 9 o'clock break and use a quick break, or, well, where's everyone at?
Let's keep going.
You all right to keep going? You all right to keep going? You all right to keep going? I like to check with everyone. Everyone's entitled to a little break here. Haven't taken one. You okay over there on staff? All right. Okay, I know we want to get out of here too, just balancing everything. Okay. Item 10C, community microgrid discussion, and we'll have a staff report. And here we just have to receive this report. Okay, great. Hey, Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Miles Virginia, Public Works Director and City Engineer. I am here to present the microgrid, community microgrid discussion tonight. So just a little background. What is a community microgrid? Essentially, it's a locally controlled system for energy, energy system. So think about it as a mini service provider within a subset of a larger system of a power grid. So multiple customers within a defined boundary. It's disconnected. It can be disconnected from a larger grid, which folks call island mode during certain outages, and it allows for the providing additional electricity to critical facilities and residents using, in this case, clean energy and storage capabilities. I put an asterisk next to residents because it's really about which homes happen to be within that microgrid boundary. It's a physical boundary where at some point you're not within that system. The key features for a microgrid, essentially we have solar panels right now. Think about the library, for example. You've got solar panels in that facility, but that is all on the back end of the meter. And then there's an interconnection where when we have additional power produced from those systems, it's fed back into the grid. The difference is this is in front of that. So that's where the term front of the meter comes in. These systems would be in front of the meter. So essentially it would be tied in to the electrical grid without a metered connection to a property. That is the difference as far as where it's placed, where it ties into the overall system. The design for this is to support, help support resilience for critical facilities. And in the context of the program we're talking about tonight, it's really tailored towards supporting disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. This would operate in parallel with the grid during normal conditions. So another term that they utilize is blue sky mode. So essentially, you wouldn't see any difference. If everything's working operationally fine, you wouldn't see any difference with that microgrid. In the event of a power outage, that whichever buildings are connected to that microgrid, they would have a certain amount of power for a defined period of time, which we'll get into a little bit more. This is managed in partnership with PG&E because they are in our location the grid provider. And then there's other entities involved, a community microgrid aggregator, so PC would be that in this case, where they could come in and support. They have skin in the game essentially, as well as other folks that are involved in the power production side. So now we're going a little bit more into the specific program that we're talking about for this opportunity. It's called the Microgrid Incentive Program, or MIP for short. It's an incentive-based program that's administered by, for us, PG&E, and it's overseen by the California Public Utilities Commission. This program, statewide, has $200 million in funding. Their awards are dependent on different projects. Essentially, up to $14 million in incentives for communities to develop these microgrids. There are certain smaller pots of money for smaller pieces, like interconnection upgrades, up to $1 million, up to $3 million for microgrid, some certain microgrid infrastructures. They also do, to support applications, they actually provide $25,000 as well for just application support. What's important to understand is what is the eligibility criteria associated with this grant opportunity. We talked a little bit about disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. So I won't go through the list here, but I put it up on the screen. A lot of the similar things that you've seen in other grant opportunities are listed here. Income levels, Cal Environmental Screen scores. They also want to target rural areas. Then when we talk about the vulnerabilities to outages, that's the other piece to this. So there's tier 2 or tier 3 high fire threat districts. That's the map that's out of the CPUC's GIS system you see on the right. Frequency of PSPS outages, if you're in a high earthquake risk zone, or if there's generally a lower historical reliability of infrastructure. Those are all things that are required to be eligible for this opportunity. I wanted to give a little asterisk because as we talk about high fire hazard zones, this map does not look as familiar to us as what we've seen with the updated CAL FIRE maps. So I did a little bit of digging into that, and the CPUC's map was developed in 2018, updated in 2021. The CAL FIRE map, which is a little bit more detailed, that for the fire hazards, that was started in 2022. And so going through some of the back and forth with CPUC and stakeholders, there are a lot of folks that are pressing for alignment with those. So I would foresee that to happen as the CPUC updates their maps moving forward. Now we're going to dive a little bit more into the site options and the scoring and evaluation considerations, which are important when we're considering what sites we should consider for a microgrid facility. So on the left, I just have some scoring and evaluation considerations. One thing that came to mind when discussing with the Peninsula Clean Energy, PCE, was that customer and community benefits are important. So resilience for critical infrastructure facilities. So think about markets, think about community centers, think about schools, evacuation zones, meeting spaces, things of that nature would be considered a critical facility. Looking at equity impacts and of course services to disadvantaged communities, all things that would help elevate scores for this competitive funding opportunity. Then you look at some of the duration, the resiliency benefits. Obviously, this is about decarbonization. That's also a big part of this because you can have diesel and gasoline generators as backup power. The whole point of this is to have clean resources as that backup source. So when you size the system, the duration of that islanding, if you will, so when system is operating by itself, there's no outside source feeding the power, how long will that last, those facilities? It's going to combination of demand on your facilities, size of your PV system, the amount of battery backup storage, all those things will come into play. It's the minimum requirements, 24 hours. In certain situations, the longer you are, the longer you can go, the more the higher the score you would get for this particular grant program. I talked a little bit about this, but the environmental benefits. So what are the greenhouse gas reductions? The renewable energy source integration here, what emissions compliance numbers are we meeting with this microgrid technology, this concept. And then with all of that, there's a benefit to cost ratio. So the higher the resilience and community value per program dollar, it's going to score more favorably. With that, there's 3 general areas, and this is where we really want to have more of a dialogue and discussion with this council and any members of the public that are interested are, what areas should we be looking for? So the 3 things that kind of came out in starting this conversation with PC and internal conversations, our south end of town, Kenyatta Cove, for example, has been hit more frequently with power outages, with higher durations of those power outages. Kenyatta Cove is not isolated in that. There's folks in the Ocean Colony, Moon Ridge, all of those little pockets of neighborhoods in that area, they've all been impacted in a higher frequency and longer durations than the other parts of town. Within Half Moon Bay proper. I know that there's on the north coast side, Moss Beach, some parts of El Granado, Moss Beach, Montera, they've also seen it as well. But again, for us, the focus is within the downtown, the Half Moon Bay boundary. The other area that we were looking at, and this is something that we've been in discussions with PCE. As mentioned in the staff report, we did have a meeting with them today, so this is kind of what we're going through right now. But there was also several, the downtown area itself has a lot of potential there because of the number of critical facilities that are centrally located. In certain areas, you could have a microgrid set up where you could get a couple of schools, county buildings, community center, potentially the library. So you have, critical facilities that would be that could be eligible for that criteria and really help boost those scores. And then one other concept that we are pondering on is the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side wastewater treatment plant. Obviously, that's a very high, it's a critical facility with a high risk for issues during an extended outage. They do have diesel generators, but there is a pretty significant decarbonization component that would come to doing a microgrid in that location. But one of the drawbacks would be the limited number of other critical facilities within that. So when you're looking at it from a competitive grant perspective, that might not score as well. I kind of skipped over that one on the downtown Half Moon Bay. Again, the south side, the number of impacted events where power was lost and the length of time was very high. That is one of the main reasons why that's on the list. But as far as what's considered a critical facility, it's on the lower end. It's flipped in the downtown. You have the critical facilities, but you don't have the duration and the frequency of the power outages.
Yeah. Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Deborah, I'm sorry, would you mind turning on your mic so we can hear you?
Is there any reason why it has to be divided this way? In other words, couldn't we do a microgrid system for the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Wastewater Plant and include a school, for instance, the high school, which is not that far away?
That's a great question. I mean, those are the types of things that we were going through with PC, and as we continue to have these conversations, we'll need to do a little bit more digging. The locations of the utility lines themselves, they do create certain boundaries. So depending on where these facilities are being fed from, that'll be an important factor to consider. The high school is within a relatively close proximity, but crossings of the highway also create additional costs that may reduce the overall score. But these are all fantastic talking points where we take note of, and we will continue our conversations with PC. So thanks for pointing that out.
Pile on there. I mean, the Sewer Authority supports all of the critical facilities in town, right? I mean, yeah, the whole city, the Mid-Coast. It seems to me that's a fairly sound argument, is that they all depend on,
Everyone uses toilets.
That's right.
See, that's a universal truth.
Yeah. Just a thought,
No, I appreciate that. These are great talking points. And so as we continue these conversations with PC, we'll take this and anything else we talk about tonight to the drawing board.
I'm on their board, and I had one of the reps come by. He just wanted to kind of schmooze with me, and I had brought him over to Nanos for Kava. And he drove around to go see the EV stations so we can talk about that. And then I talked to him about this idea before we got this email. And we drove to Kenyatta Cove, and I told him this is one that's always down out on power, and so is Ocean Colony and Moon Ridge. Thanks for bringing that up. I didn't bring that up, but we looked at the property in front, and it's like you got this big vacant land, and you need some land, isn't it, solar panels and everything too, or is?
Yes, so we talked about that, depending on where you're going to place it. You could look at buildings and placing them on certain buildings, especially depending on the age of the roof, and the, and the visibility, the exposure to the sun. But yes, that would be a big part of
So
it.
they have property in front of Kenyatta Cove, so he was like, kind of like, yeah, this could work, and so, and then a month later, we get this email. So I've already talked to him about it when I do the board meetings, and then had a meeting and a drive and visual, and then we get this email, and I was kind of excited, because here we are, one of the priorities that we're trying to resolve is Kenyatta Cove, Ocean Colony, but we have to fall into that category, and I think highly that if we include Moonridge also, but that's county, I don't know if that works, so you brought that up, and I don't know how that all works now, because that's county.
It is a different jurisdiction,
Right.
and so in that regard, it would be a little bit more complicated, but not impossible. So again, we wanted to have these conversations to see really what makes the most sense. And the jurisdictional boundary is one factor. It's also the system itself, where the utility lines, what zones feed the different neighborhoods. You may be across the street from a different zone. Your feed might be coming from somewhere else. And those would be things that would be additional cost to try to bring certain areas into a different zone. So, but again, it's all great for conversation as we develop our scope and application.
Just think if water and sewer were consolidated, that would be a major critical facility.
Sometimes with grants, right, or scoring, you try to be creative. I'm just thinking all the pump stations in Ocean Colony, the number of maybe medical facilities in Kenyatta Cove that might, I don't know if there's any there, but, there could be potentially, just trying to think, because to me, that's the part of town we're really trying to address. And, what we could do to try and encourage, to look that way. The other thing, though, I would want to also look at how much commitment is there by city staff. That to me, before you actually file it, I think it's important, especially right now, to understand, what we have, the work plan. If you guys, whoever's going to manage it.
No, that's a great point. I think I have only a couple more slides. Let me wrap it
I thought you
up.
were done.
And yeah, and then we can, if I haven't answered it, we can definitely go back, have a little bit more dialogue. Just real quickly on this program, project life cycle, we're really in the first phase of this thing. This is a 10-year effort for this to go from start to finish. You're talking about just the consultation and the application. We are kind of getting to the end of the application prep period. The application submittal would be the beginning of the stage 2. They're due on December 17th. And you can see here, there's going to be a lot of conversations about studies, interconnection studies, looking at island studies, and then there's project implementation, environmental review, design, all those other components to it. And then, within 5 years, 4 to 5 years, you would see construction, commencement, and then you're looking at operation, and then you're looking at the performance obligations. So it is not a quick turnaround, but it's something that will require some staff time. And so getting into the last slide, where does Peninsula Clean Energy come in? They are positioned to lead these these MIP projects. So, they would be our program lead. They're obviously a regional leader in driving these types of participation in clean energy, and are very familiar with PG&E's inner workings, as well as this microgrid incentive program. So they would be leading this application process, with support from city staff on specific local needs and other project information. So I think right now, when we're talking about site design, understanding where the critical needs are, where the facilities could be, helping find some of the areas where we could put PV systems that are with available land or buildings that make sense. Those would be things that we can certainly, we would be supporting them on. Another piece I really wanted to understand was the system ownership and operations. That's a huge consideration. We are not in, there are other jurisdictions like City of Palo Alto that have their own electrical utility staff on hand. We do not have that. And so that was one thing that we asked, and they were very clear that whoever would own it, and in this case, it would be PCE, they would be responsible. They did put the caveat that, they could self-operate it or they could contract this out to a third party. But again, that's something that their board would have to review and approve as they move forward hopefully with a application that's approved. And again, and just the last piece I wanted to put it, why this matters is because we want to make sure that we ensure a clear lead so that we can establish a streamlined application and have a defined project delivery. The O&M responsibilities, again, we want to guarantee long-term resilience and success for this project if it gets chosen. We want to make sure that it's that we can get those deliverable performance obligations and the data we need. I obviously, based on the past conversations, I'd like to hear more about where the council stands on this, but we do see this as aligning with certain investments in our community-wide decarbonization goals, as well as equity for some of our disadvantaged communities and vulnerable communities. That's it. The recommendation is just to receive this report, and we'd like to hear any additional feedback you may have.
We also have one public comment.
Can I make a quick comment just to add on? Maz covered it really well and on very little notice. This got pulled together very quickly as information came out, and we're also grateful to PCE for meeting with us and helping to get us ready for tonight. Given all the discussions we've had, we made it really clear in meeting with them, and luckily they want to lead, that the city it'd be very unlikely we could financially contribute to a project like this, and that our bandwidth is limited. They want to make a project go forward. They want to see it have impacts on the community to demonstrate its value. There may be an opportunity for the city to support that with our limited resources. They understand that. If a project moves forward, they will carry the burden on that. So that's been made clear, and obviously there will be decision points along the way.
You answered my questions. Thank you.
So hi, it's Jimmy Benjamin again. I've had solar on my roof since 2016, and I'm a fan. I think all of the things I saw on this slide reinforce that this is a really appealing idea. Having it in front of the meter says that the voltages are going to be on the lines between, whatever is wherever you locate the power supply. So that the candidates are the things that are on that line. That can be broad, and the topology of your system is going to have ramifications, right? That's significant. The location where you're providing the service is not necessarily the same as the location where you're providing the charging and storing facilities. And I'm sure that PCE is aware of this, and I am keenly aware that our Public Works Director, our former Public Works Director, are keenly aware of this. But batteries don't like water. If you put batteries in a tsunami zone, and when you have another alternative, I'm not sure that's a good choice. Now, I'm not saying it's so hazardous that you should nix the whole idea. I live right next to the SAM plant, and I have batteries in my garage. I move them out to the front of my garage, but they're in my garage, and I could put them in a battery box. But as you're thinking about site placement, make a powerful distinction between where you're going to locate the potential combustibles and where you want to provide the power. Also, be aware, or I would submit, that when the utility puts this in, for the battery to operate correctly, they're going to be having to discharge and recharge. They can't just leave it at a fixed energy level. So the value proposition I saw in the presentation was about energy resilience. PCE has a different set of objectives. Maybe they're locating power supplies to deliver in ways that support them, which is great. But when you're negotiating a plan, be aware of the benefits to them. That's not in the picture right now. The ramifications for other people that are not critical infrastructure facilities. I'll just use myself as a selfish example, but it could be one of my neighbors. Bear with me, please. If the power is being provided to the sand plant, it turns out that I'm in the same power block as the sand plant. So the voltage that makes them happy is going to be seen by my meter. I don't know if that means that I get power from the microgrid or not. I have power during the day because my solar system will provide it. But at night, is there some logical thing I have to add to my meter to say, okay, you can get power, or something that has to be added to say, no, you can't get power? So the logistics of how it interacts with non-critical resources, there's a lot to think about there. And I'm happy to participate in the conversation. There are also other people in my neighborhood that have been in this industry for decades. So let's be a resource to you and to PCE going forward and try to address these problems in a smart, upfront way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy, for the heads up. Appreciate it.
So I got to say, PCE is pretty impressive with the projects that I've been seeing on the board and how they're doing for low income and apartment buildings. It's pretty, and they're doing these big solar farms out in like Bakersfield. I mean, they're huge. Their company is pretty impressive. So I'm pretty excited, you know, if we can get something going through this company and qualify. But I also understand what you're saying, Jimmy and Maz. I'm eventually going to go this end of the month. I'm putting solar panels on my house. So I'm kind of getting new into this. I'll be with Jimmy, all excited, and eventually get a battery. So it's new to me, but I think this is the wave to go. And I think if we can get something for Kenyatta Cove and the people that have been blacked out, which we all heard in the beginning of the year, we're upset. This could be an alternative for us to come up with an idea.
Yeah, well, I like what Jimmy said. You know, always ask what's in it for them. And also, you know, these are very fast-changing technologies, you know, and we're talking a 10-year project, and, you know, just something we have to keep in the back of our minds, you know, like we had one issue with another provider of energy, if you remember, and kind of fell through. And so, you know, there's risks, you know. You're 4 years in, you say, oh my God, here's this other technology that it's much more efficient and smoother, you know. It's just the nature of the beast. So it's something to keep in mind, who stays in advance of that and who doesn't. But it's a great idea, you know, and if we can keep the SAM sewerage running, that to me is such a top priority because it does affect everybody's well-being on the entire coast, actually, not just Half-Moon Bay. So, anyway, great. Anything else? We've accepted this report. Thank you, Miles.
May I ask one question?
Yeah.
Let me preface that with a comment first. These systems, and I didn't go into that detail, these systems are expensive, obviously. So adding the photovoltaic system and battery backups and doing the interconnection work for a project maybe a quarter the size of the downtown could be $10 million. So as you scale up, and I mean, that was one question we asked was upfront, is it possible to make their entire city boundary a microgrid? Yes, it's possible, but you know, there's a cost to it. So if if there's a ranking, I guess that was the question, where do you believe staff should talk to PC about focusing on? If we're going to have one microgrid project, where does this council believe we should be focusing our efforts on? The downtown obviously is highly eligible because of the criteria with the critical facilities. The sand plant, you can also make it, there was a lot of great arguments about how that would make a lot of sense and check a lot of boxes. The south side of town is a little bit more challenging because of the lack of quote unquote critical facilities, but obviously has the highest frequency of issues. So is there any guidance that council can provide on where staff should really focus that effort on?
I guess I'm thinking the sewer authority, but I would love to see it include some other critical facilities. I'd love to see if there's any way we could do a microgrid to include the high school and the sand plant.
The high school has solar panels in the parking lot.
They do, but those are back of meter, right? So that's something we can talk about with our professionals at PC that are putting the application together to get more understanding of whether that could be incorporated into it or not. I would imagine that if it's in close proximity, there could be a workaround there to try to create a microgrid, including that infrastructure.
So what if we try to ask PCE and we give them the 3 scenarios, sand plant, high school, and Kenyatta Cove, and downtown, or four, and which one do you think would be more eligible for the grants? Is basically what you're asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
What fits the criteria? Yeah. Would they be able to guide us through that?
They have. Unfortunately, the criteria, we have no discretion over. It comes from the state CPUC. PCE and PG&E have to operate within that. We will continue to make arguments based on where we prioritize, but really, it's kind of a upside-down equation. The area that is the most competitive is the downtown. The area that has, I think, the greatest need is the south end, but not terribly competitive, maybe not competitive at all. If we could include the fire station, we might have one critical facility, but we don't, again, it has to be on the same feeder line, so there's some analysis that PCE would have to do for us. We will argue to the ends of the earth that we've got vulnerable populations down there. We have facilities that are critical to our economy and to our infrastructure here. But when you're talking about state criteria, it just may not fly. And so that's going to be less competitive. And I think in the middle, we have the sand plant, which is a critical facility by definition. Can we make bigger arguments? And so really what we're looking for is, do we pursue where the most need is, or do we pursue where the most likelihood of actually getting the grant?
I think if you looked at just the south end of town, I don't think it would compete well against Pescadero. But I was thinking, we, CCAG applied to the federal government for a grant for a federal appropriation to back up all the traffic signals. It was going to create a plan for emergency evacuations and link up, the signal activity so that we could evacuate more smoothly. To me, the signals, especially in a situation where you have to evacuate, that's kind of a critical facility or facilities, right? So if you could link downtown and the signals, or the sewer authority and the traffic signals, but I think if we could lump in, the signal backup, I think that's compelling. Because I don't think I don't think the feds are gonna put it in the budget.
Again, another argument we would make, the criteria are pretty specific, and I don't remember traffic signals being included in that, but again.
I think it's worth the conversation.
Yeah.
We might maybe need to look at it by, which kind of emergency impacts, well, what if it's an earthquake? What if it's a tsunami? Fire, and earthquakes can kind of go together often. And that's, we haven't been hit with an earthquake in quite a while that causes that much damage. But boy, if it does, is it better to have your sewers working? There's a lot of, and I don't know. I don't have any of these answers. I'm just saying in terms of trying to plan it out.
I had a mentor in government years ago talking about an issue, and she kind of stopped herself and she says, "I'm sorry, I'm using common sense here." I think we make really great arguments here, but we're up against very strict criteria. And so I think what we really need to know coming out of today's meeting is kind of the way I framed it. Do we choose the area with the most need that is least competitive? Do we choose the area with probably the least acute need? Certainly a microgrid downtown could be beneficial. and it would be very competitive? Or do we pick the one in the middle and try to just argue our way through it? I think that's the feedback we need tonight.
But also the criteria of what's most likely to win the grant, right? So Sam, without a doubt, is an emergency type.
But it's one critical facility. They score it based on having multiple, which is the downtown.
Isn't somebody on staff sleeping with somebody in the CPUC?
Not that I'm aware of.
They should be.
Okay, well, I don't know how to respond to that.
I don't sleep at all. I'm just constantly awake.
Okay, can I get back to sewer? Is there any way you can say it relies on the whole coast? I mean, it is one facility, sort of, kind of, because it's really part of multiple facilities.
Yeah, I think that's something we're going to have to discuss with the staff at PCE and really get a better understanding, because they're also consulting with the PG&E. They have a rep at PG&E that's helping, the liaison that helps with this, specifically looking at the critical facilities and the scoring. So I think we can bring it up and.
Right, because I don't want to just do, this is me speaking, I don't want to just do something just because, we can get money for that. I mean, and I don't want to say downtown's not important, of course it is. But we know that, there's some other areas that really could use it. I mean, the downtown has, it's pretty well connected, and it has the ability to survive on its own if necessary for, not forever, but a good extended time, whereas looking at what we just talked about, south end of town and the sand plant. I don't know.
I think the best thing for us moving forward as a staff is to have this conversation with PCE, follow up with them, and get them to communicate with PG&E, and then bring them back for a conversation before the deadline. I mean, we have till, it's not a whole lot of time, but we have till December 17th for this application to go forward. So once we get a better understanding of what is competitive and makes the most sense from a cost-benefit ratio perspective, then we can come to council with that information and then decide whether it's worth it. I mean, that's the question. Is it worth going after something that meets the criteria, even though the benefit may not be there?
Yeah. The other piece I'll just share is, if that's where we go, and thank you, Maz, I think that probably is the best recommendation tonight, is part of what makes the downtown so competitive is the concentration of critical facilities. Several of them are school district facilities. Hatch, Cunha, proximity to the library, those things. I have a meeting with the superintendent on Thursday. We meet monthly. Our meeting is this Thursday. I'm going to broach this with him and get his stance. Are their solar panels already taking care of all their needs? Because they may be a bigger stakeholder in a downtown plan anyways. We also probably need to talk to the county, because obviously the health clinic falls into that critical facility. Where we would benefit is really this strip of land here, our community center, EOC, sheriff substation. The other thing that's interesting with the downtown, as we've talked about and Jimmy pointed out, is some people may benefit from it just by proximity. The downtown one, when we saw the boundaries, really doesn't extend to anybody else. But it would cover the event center. It would cover this facility. So again, in an emergency, it would keep the lights on in a lot of really critical facilities. But the point has been made, and I think we agree, this is an area that is not hit hard by power outages, and there's a lot of backups. So I think what we're hearing, if I may, is we've got a lot of good feedback. We have time, as Maz said. We can shop this some more, talk through some of these scenarios. We've gotten some great feedback, and we'll return before that deadline for some more direction, if that's okay.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Great. Before we wrap up, a point of order. If we go back to item 10A, the financial report, we were so excited about all the great news, we didn't take a vote to accept that report. If we could really quickly take care of that before we close the meeting, otherwise we'd have to take care of it later.
I make a motion that we accept the financial report for the quarter ended June 30th, 2025.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Nagengast?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Mayor Brownstone?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Great. Any commission committee updates? Any future discussion items? Any city council reports? Great. This meeting is over. Thank you, everybody.